I'm Brian Voakes, and this is me.
Tell me about Harvey Milk.
I was a young gay man, in fact, a gay teenager in the 70s, and I grew up in the suburbs of San Francisco. And Harvey Milk was pretty much a media name already by 1974, 75, 76. And when I finally moved into San Francisco, I lived about 25 miles away. When I finally moved into the city to go to university, I was totally immersed in the Castro, the brand new gay city. Everything was no longer hippie in San Francisco, which I'd kind of grown up with. It was gay, and gay was the new hippie in a funny way. And Harvey had a camera shop on Castro Street, and it was a very important business, not only just because it was an openly gay business, but it was also a place you could get your photographs developed. Because at that time, you just didn't go anywhere and get your pictures developed, and we didn't have digital cameras or anything like that. So compromising pictures or naked pictures or anything like that, someone would be looking at them. So when you went down to the drugstore to pick up your photographs, someone would eye you as if to say, "I know what you would get up to." So having a place like Castro Camera to go to is fantastic. Harvey did something amazing, though. What he did was he kept a contact sheet of everyone's photographs that came in for developing. So if you had a 35 millimeter strip of film, he kept as a gay archive everyone's photographs. And so everyone wanted to have their pictures taken there, because what he then did, if it was the day after Gay Parade or the day after Halloween, go down to Castro Camera and hope your picture was in the window, because it was a constant display of who we were. And it was just a real accolade to make it into the window, but it was just really wonderful feeling to see all this fun and all this love and millions of photographs and just strips after strips after strips in the window. It was wonderful. And then, as it turns out, it would turn out to be an incredibly important archive later on. I know someone who worked on the film Milk, and it was that bank of photographs that made the accuracy in that film, the beautiful, beautiful attention to detail, which is just beyond me. I cry at the backgrounds more than the story when I watch that movie, because it's such a wonderful, loving trip down memory lane.
What did you think of the story? Is it accurate?
Of the movie Milk, I thought it was brilliant. I loved it. Not only did I love it for its accurate retelling of the story, and it's for its really remarkable portrayals as well. I loved it. Well, I did have one slight bug about it. Thing bugged me, and that was the ending. It ended with a very touching and sad candlelight march procession, and that's not where the story ended. Harvey Milk's story ended with the riots. It didn't end with a really sad and peaceful and teary candlelight procession, which we weren't all that, we would become quite accustomed to, actually. I still think I have the cup and candle from that night in a box somewhere. But us gay boys, at least, were really good at getting down there and marching when we were needed. We were always the fillers for making a good crowd. But it was that one night when they announced the sentence of Dan White, and he was given not a first-degree murder charge, just given 7 years in prison, manslaughter, that not only did the gays peacefully demonstrate, but the police violently demonstrated. And they came into the Castro and they busted up bars and they clobbered people, and it was real war. And to me, that was the turning point. And until then, honestly, I was like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old, and I was having the time of my life. It couldn't have been better if you were to be. I remember I used to say to people, I'm just so glad I'm alive right now, because if I were to be gay, this is the time period I want to be gay in. And it was just a big party. And it went on year after year after year. And little did we know what was coming. But at the time, we were blissfully unaware. But suddenly the law came down on us. And from people like me, a little bit post Stonewall, I was, like 13 when Stonewall happened, 14, something like that. So this was suddenly the heavy hand of the law. And we had been, as out gay men and being super polite and loved the way the world was beginning to accept us, because we were showing only good taste and being well dressed and being very good at our jobs and all that kind of goody two shoes type gay stuff. Suddenly I saw a sign that said, "No more Mr. Nice Gay." That spoke to me. That said, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget who you are. Don't forget where you're going, because that fire has to always burn. It can never go out. So yes, the movie was important to me. It rekindled a fire in my heart, and it just will serve as a perfect memory for me of a time. I don't like boring young people with that story. I don't like saying, oh, it was so great back then, all that. No, that's my story. You make your own. And I'll respect you for it. And if you want to tell me about it in a long time from now, what amazing things happen, I will love it on your behalf. But I'm not going to make you swallow my history. It's mine.
But you were at the riot, right?
Absolutely. That night, it was funny. We were used to marching, and you would we lived in communities where people rarely had their own house. Say you'd have a house that was divided into flats or an apartment building. So on my street, on DeBow Street, we had a whole, it was Tales of the City. It was completely Tales of the City. Every apartment, you knew everyone all around you. You knew everyone's business. Everyone was comfortable with everyone. It reminded me in a funny way as when I was a little boy in the suburbs, I knew all the kids on our street, and I had open door access to any of the houses of my neighbors, because that was our neighborhood. That was our gang. Well, I had the same thing. But we're all gay. we were more grown up, but we certainly were having a good time. And call came through, this is what happened, that the cops have gone down to the Elephant Walk and smashed it up and clubbed people. And it was like time to mobilize. Now, I don't know if you know San Francisco, but I live very close to that big Safeway, DeBow Street, which was often the kind of meeting point between Castro Street on the way to City Hall. So we just kind of got up and ran, and I didn't really think about it, but I had about 6 friends with me, I guess. And it was all very exciting. And it was crazy, because as we came down the hill from sort of, I guess it's Hayes Street or something like that, you could see down at City Hall, burning cars, police on horseback, shit like that. It's very scary. It's very exciting. And but me being me and being Californian, and that's just the way I am, I didn't really think it out very well. And we kind of sauntered down to City Hall expecting something great, but we didn't expect war. And so suddenly we were being charged by police, or charged by policemen on horses. That was their idea of dispersing the crowd. I remember a friend of mine somehow getting a bullhorn and screaming at the crowd. And we thought, oh, I got to leave him. He's going to, we'll resurface tomorrow and find out. But my friends and I decided we would have to scatter, and we would have to go in all different directions. And we would circle around the Fillmore, the Hay, all the way around, and come back home again and regroup and make sure everyone was okay. I unfortunately did not have the appropriate foot gear. And I remember being on the tracks on the bit of the metro that was still on the surface, and tripping because I had flip-flops on, and trying to run and being a little bit scared, but also excited, but a little bit scared, and tearing off, and realizing when I finally stopped that I was barefoot and that I had a flip-flop kind of wrapped around one ankle, and that I was safe. but I couldn't believe what I'd done. And we got home, we all regrouped. Everyone, it was sort of like roll call. Everyone was safe. And we went from there. When I saw the movie Milk, I was angry that it didn't include that night. I wanted my night in there. And instead, I wrote to my nieces and nephews and I said, I've just seen this movie and maybe you'd like to know my perspective of it because I was there. And I remember writing out basically kind of what I've just told you, but my word of advice, when the revolution comes, don't wear flip-flops.
What came next, of course, you say what came next was the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah, everything changed. It just goes to show that we, when I came out in like 1976, I thought in all the demonstration through the Briggs thing, Anita Bryant, all that kind of stuff, that and suddenly gay sex was legal and the age of consent was lowered, and suddenly things looked like it was going to change. And I personally felt responsible for some of it. I felt that my demonstrating and the t-shirts I wore and all of that stuff had changed the world somehow. And I thought that I was not only living in the piece of history that I would have chosen if I was given a choice, but also I was being part of responsible for a change in history. And I thought it was the last fight. I thought we'd won it. I thought we're not going to turn around. We're not going to look backwards anymore. And it's only going to be towards the sunset for all of us. It's going to be lovely. And little did we know it wasn't. And it wasn't necessarily a human rights thing right off the bat. It wasn't the moral majority or the religious right or anything like that. It was science. It was sex, and it was disease, and it was something completely different. I mean, before that, you'd go to the city clinic on any given day in 1979, and you'd probably come home with 2 phone numbers from 2 guys you met who were there being tested for their STDs at the time and not think twice about it. No, not so anymore. Not so anymore. So I guess it was just, San Francisco has a very, it has a history of rising from the ashes through time, whether it's plague or earthquake or fire or whatever. And it did again. But it was pretty awful, to say the least, and quite shocking. People were just kind of dropping right and left. And so it makes you think, like now, someone says to me, you don't need to wear a mask. Well, I still have a bit of a scar from the first time around when we didn't know what to do and how to be safe. When I remember going to Amsterdam once and someone handing me a leaflet about safe sex. This is about 1982, I think. And this first thing on it said, "Don't have sex with Americans." It's like, welcome to Holland. So I just, we don't take anything for granted anymore, put it that way. Things can change. Coins can flip, directions can completely reverse. You never know. So you need just to be on your toes.
Do you look at the progress we've made since then, and do you think it's secure? Do you feel optimistic about the future?
I do. What I sort of feel, it's a bit like building muscle mass or going on a diet. It just doesn't go in a linear line, either down or up. You don't gain muscle up and you don't lose weight going down. It goes up and down and up and down and up and down, but it generally goes down. Or you go up and down and up and down in confidence as it goes up. We need to look at the bigger picture. So now we have 50 years of history to look at, and we can see that there are huge changes in the way people treat other people. Right now, unfortunately, I think we're on one of these blips that it's going down because we've had, especially in America and here, people have, for some reason, taken the liberty or the so-called right to be wrong, to treat people badly. They say it's my right to be racist. It's my right to be homophobic. Well, they're not really saying it exactly that way, but that's really what they're saying. That's what it boils down to. I can be a racist because it's my right. And before, more or less, we were learning that everyone has civil rights and that everyone has to be treated equally. And we're getting along there. And I believe we're still there, going upward in progress. I just think we have periodic stumbling, get up, dust ourselves off, get back up again, and we'll probably go a little bit higher up the level as time goes on. I don't think we're flat, and I don't think we're degrading. I just think we're it's like having a fever, and you'll get over it.
Ryan Voakes, thanks very much.
You're welcome. Happy Pride.
I'm Lesley Hart, and this is me.
How are you feeling, Lesley?
Well, Gareth, I've had better days. So as you know, I was sitting my driving test this morning for the second time, and this time I managed to fuck it up within about 15 minutes. It was really hard though. It was really hard. I felt like it was really unfair, and it was the same like tyrant that I had the last time as well. Felt like it was like 10 extremely complicated big roundabouts, like just one after another, and I did something dangerous, and then that was it. And because of COVID times, they just take you back. And then as we were sort of pulling into the test centre again, I realised that it was all over, and I think I just lost the plot and I drove on the wrong side of the road, so I was on the right hand side. So it was like, and then it was just a bit of a disaster. I feel like, am I too old to take on these kinds of challenges, like a test scenario? I just feel like at this point in life, maybe it's just too much to bear. Like you're used to that. You used to kind of, as a young person, as a 17-year-old trying to learn to drive, you've been to school, you're about to go to university, you're used to being tested on a daily basis, examined and whatnot. It's just not something that happens these days. And I just think that maybe I've left it too late. This is where you say it's never too late.
Right, it's never too late. Have you been a late starter in any other respect?
So yes, the thing about when I was thinking about talking to you about my own queer identity, what's really good about doing this with you is it feels like it is kind of the first time I've properly, like, publicly spoken about my sexuality, which is ridiculous because I'm 42. Like, why is this? I'm an actor, but I'm also a writer, and I haven't really written about it yet. And why is that? So I've been reflecting on all of these things, and just sort of thinking about my queer life so far, my queer romantic history, all of these things, and trying to sort of piece together some sort of story, or like make some sort of sense of it. And I think one of the defining factors, I think maybe one of the reasons that it's not quite as clear, or it's not quite something that has been that I've spent too much of my life defining myself by, is because I'm what you would call a late blooming lesbian. It was I wasn't sort of wrestling with my like gay feelings when I was a teenager, or I wasn't aware of that at the time. I think in hindsight I can see those were definitely there, but I was one of those who I don't think I came out to myself properly until I was like 29, and that was a glorious revelation. It was just like the thrill and the sort of release and revelation. I mean, it was a glorious time, but I guess 10 years later or 15 years later, then it might have happened. So then kind of like embarking on that life of like, oh my God, there's all this world of women out there. And I mean, first of all, I had a girlfriend, and that when that all went tits up, and I was single, I was like, oh my God, now I can explore the world of women. I can go to the polo lounge. I can try and meet other people. I was really excited about it, but kind of discovered that I was a bit like at the polo lounge in Glasgow. I was a bit like the mature student who's kind of joined the undergraduates. They're all 17, 18, 19, and I'm trying to turn up to the same parties as them. So essentially I was having my kind of lesbian adolescence, or like lesbian coming of age time, at a point where I was essentially almost dead in gay years. I know that's a controversial thing to say, but that's what it felt like at the time. Like, oh my God, I've missed the boat, was what it felt like a little bit. Yeah.
And had your desire been submerged, I suppose, until you were 29, or was that something that came before, or like how did you get?
Well, so no, I mean, I was 29 when I first had a little moment of saying to myself that if I fall in love with a woman, then I won't resist it. I'll go with that. And I don't know what prompted that in me, but it wasn't the first time I'd been attracted to women. It wasn't the first time I'd had a gay experience. Actually, I was about 19 when I first was kissed by a girl, and that was one of the most incredible, the surprise of it. I mean, it did take me by surprise that she kissed me in the garage in 1999. It wasn't even a gay place, and like neither of us were, you know, it surprised me, but then I guess on reflection, of course that was going to happen. It had been building up to this. So I had this momentous experience of being kissed in the garage and feeling like, oh, my whole like body lurch and flip, and I nearly fell over. It was so exciting. And I still remember it really, really vividly. The garage nightclub on Suggy Hall Street in Glasgow. But still, that wasn't the beginning of my journey to coming out or anything. It was just something that happened, and something that kept happening with someone for a while, and on and off for the next kind of 10 years and beyond, actually. But yes, it didn't sort of change my identity at the time. It might be something to do with the times I was living in. That would have been 1999. And also I think I had boyfriends at the time, and that was, you know, we were students, and I guess when you're a student, you're experimenting with lots of things, and so it just felt like, is it maybe just one of those things? But hindsight is a wonderful thing when you do eventually come out to yourself, and then that revelation illuminates your whole life so far, and you kind of sheds fresh light on experiences that I had when I was 19 and being kissed by a girl, and then, you know, what that might have meant to me, but also much further back when I was a little kid, and sort of I don't know how much sexuality has got to do with being like a diehard tomboy who, like, I wouldn't wear any girls' clothes or anything, and I played football all the time, and but I do remember that there was a girl at school who I loathed. She was my nemesis, but also probably my biggest inspiration, because I hated her, but we were like arch rivals for everything, for grades at school and in sports, and for boys and things, as kind of like, you know, young teenagers. We hated each other, but I was kind of obsessed with her, and I don't think maybe I would have tried as hard at any of those things, school or sports or boys, had it not been about winning, like beating her. And she was beautiful, and I think it was really, it was kind of delightful and funny, and a relief to realize later on in life that I was actually in love with her. I mean, I did hate her, but like this is a girl I was obsessed with, and sort of really did come to define my adolescence, or it was a huge influence on me. So yeah, all of that I can trace. After 29, you sort of switch the light on, you go, this is me. And then you kind of sort of can look at your whole life afresh and go, yeah, now I understand why I couldn't stop thinking about that girl I fucking hated. Yeah, so there was a lot of it helped me understand a lot of kind of what had gone on throughout my life prior to coming out, as it were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that was a way to have a passionate relationship with another girl, even though the passion was hatred.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I kind of was aware all the time of where she was, and I kind of wanted to be near her. I kind of like, and part of that was, I guess, this unresolved thing of like, we hate each other. I don't like having that. I want to sort of, I would have dreams about us becoming friends and things. But and then later in life, the dreams changed a bit. But you know, it's kind of, but there's always been, this has been a big unresolved thing. And actually, I have written in like the first play I ever wrote for the radio was about her, and about that rivalry and about being obsessed with her. So yeah, so like I guess that those experiences that you don't realize how formative they are in every sense that they're formative until maybe later on.
And how would you think you would cope being young today, being a young lesbian?
Do you know, it's really interesting because I feel like kids today are really empowered in a way that is different maybe from when I was younger. I was very fortunate to have been allowed always to wear the clothes I wanted to wear, to play the games I wanted to play. Like my parents would never have said, you can't play football, that's a boys' game, or you can't wear boys' clothes, you can't get your hair cut short. Even though I know my dad was devastated when I got all my girly curls cut off. They never imposed any kind of thing on me. So I felt I didn't ever feel troubled as a youngster, but I guess there was never a question about gender identity that was any more than being mistaken for a boy. I quite enjoyed being mistaken for a boy, but I guess the sort of questions that children might be asking now weren't around back then. And who knows whether or not, in the grand scheme of things, people are better off. But I think that these days, I think that what is obviously a massive progression is education. It's in school, no Section 28. It's really progressive, and I think hopefully that translates into kids feeling like they can be whoever they are at every age of their life. But I mean, but also to kind of, I guess one caveat I would want to sort of ensure is that, you know, this person you are at 10 is not the same person you are at 15 or at 20 or at 25, or even, you know, that it's that actually not only can you be whoever you are, and that's completely valid and that's glorious and great, and you know, and don't be ashamed, also embrace the fact that, you know, you grow as a human and go through different stages of your life, and that's great too. So I mean, I'm a late bloomer, but that doesn't mean that, I mean, I felt a little bit like the mature student, but there's nothing wrong with being the mature student. You just feel a bit uncool. You just get a bit of a complex. you know, an 18-year-old's party.
That's okay.
Yeah, but I think if anything, like anything that I sort of feel really, um, I guess, delighted by and sort of proud of in my life is that I've had the space to kind of feel myself, to embrace the changes that I've felt have happened in me, and whatever's driven that, whether it's come from within or whether it's just because I've met people or whatever. I find that endlessly mysterious and endlessly fascinating, and that's a good thing.
Lesley Hart, thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Gary Nunn, and this is me.
Gary, I understand you're going to be a father.
Wow, what an opening question. Yes. Well, yes and no. So yeah, biologically speaking, I am, because I donated to a sperm clinic last year. But we kind of don't actually use the vocabulary of father, because a dad is who brings you up and cares for you. And that is not what I'm going to be doing for my offspring, we call them. So they're going to be, I've donated my sperm so that families that can't currently have kids too easily are able to do so. So yes, so whoever brings them up is the dad, and that could be it could be a straight couple that are struggling to conceive. It could be a lesbian couple, so they've got two parents, obviously, or it could be a single woman. And when the child turns 18, the law's changed now in Australia so that you can no longer donate anonymously. So when they turn 18, they get a letter from me, and I am the donor. Yeah. So and at that point they decide whether they would like to contact me, or whether they'd like to leave it a few years and have a think about it, or whether they're quite happy just reading the letter that I've written for them and going on with their life. So it's kind of child-led, it's their decision.
And what inspired you to do that, to make that decision?
Yeah, a couple of things actually. So I'm a journalist, and I was doing a story on this, and I was chatting with one of my editors, and we were struggling to understand why men donated sperm, what the impetus was. So we thought, what better way than to go out and speak to some of them? And that was when I realised that you could no longer donate anonymously. And through doing that, I realised the law had changed, and now it's called a de-identified donor. So basically the process in Australia, and I believe it's very similar now in Britain, is that they have a lot of access to information about you. They have a picture of you up until 8 years old. So you're de-identified. They couldn't recognise you in the street, for example. And they get all of your statistics and a letter from you, and your best qualities and your worst faults and all of that stuff, loads and loads of information. And so anyway, when I discovered that, so I put a call out saying I'm looking for people that have donated sperm, and to my surprise, two of my friends had done it and hadn't even told me about it, and they both happened to be gay men. And I think it's something that is very, very attractive for gay men at the moment, and we're at a specific time in history when it is attractive, because we're men who obviously can't easily have children, and some of us don't necessarily want to have children at this point. But the idea of first of all, it's altruistic, and being able to help families that really, really, really want kids and can't, and we're able to give them what they need through our donation. So that was like the first impetus for the people that I spoke to, and also for me. But then the second one, I guess, is a little bit more I don't want to use the word selfish, but like a little bit more about me and my future. And I was looking to the future and looking what my life was like, and I was thinking, oh, do I really want my life to be the same as it is now when I'm in my late 50s and in my 60s? And the idea of doing this, I can help up to 4 families in New South Wales, and on average they will have up to 2 children each from my donation. So that's up to 8 little Garys running around, and when they receive this letter, it's really clear that my door's always going to be open. My details are always going to be up to date with the clinic. And whether they want to track me down and meet me, even if it's just once, or never at all, is entirely up to them. But if they would like to meet me and have an ongoing relationship with me once they turn 18, I've made it very clear in my letter that I'd be really excited about that, and I'd really welcome that. And I listened to a podcast called You Look Like Me, which is all about donor conceived children. I did a whole bunch of research and thought about it for 6 months before I did it, because you have to do it before you're 45. There's nothing like a deadline to spur journalists into action. So I thought, I'm a few years off, so I don't want to delay it too long. And I listened to this podcast, and I found out, and I listened to a lot of stories from donor conceived children, and I realized that the kind of letter that I wrote was the kind of one that these donor conceived children who were the products of anonymous donations had really wished that they could have heard, which was like, you are really wanted not only by your parents, but like, it was really meaningful for me to give this donation. And here are my reasons. And this is what I would love to happen in the future, but it is entirely up to you and there's no pressure. So I made it really clear that I'd love to meet and have a relationship with them when they're older. And if one of those approximately 8 children eventually does decide to do that, then if they then go on to have their own children, I get the opportunity to be a granddad figure to my own grandkids from the moment of their birth. And that's when you do get to call yourself a granddad, because, you know, you've pitched in, you've mucked in. So yeah, quite a lot of thought process went into it. It was quite convoluted, but like, if that never, I would just want to say, if that never happens, like if they never decide that they don't want to do that, or they decide they don't want kids or anything like that, it still absolutely enriches my life to know that I've helped people that really wanted kids. Since I wrote the letter to my unborn child, which is a really weird process, and obviously I had to ask for more paper. Like no one asked for more paper, and I had to ask for more paper because I had a lot to say to them. I have felt really, really differently about dying. So like before I wrote that letter, I felt ambivalent about when I died, as long as it was after my mum. Sounds grim. I don't want to die, I want to live. But like I was ambivalent about when I died. I didn't really care, like whether it was 60, 70, whatever, I didn't care. As long as it was after my mum and she didn't have to deal with that awful grief. Since I wrote that letter, I've put a promise out into the world that my door's always going to be open for these kids. And I'm no longer ambivalent about when I die. And it's made me take better care of my health and better care of myself since then. Yeah, that's the bit I didn't get to say. Because it's a promise out in the universe that like I have to keep myself well and healthy and alive as long as possible, because I've made those kids a promise and they deserve for me to see that through.
And have you ever wanted to be an actual dad, a hands-on, having a baby, you know, pushing a buggy dad?
Oh God. I did have a little think about it. Well, my best friend in Britain is lesbian, and we did have that conversation. But we're both quite big personalities, and we had this French friend, and we were telling her about that. We were just having the conversation, and she said it is worse than anyone could imagine if you have child, because we're both quite outgoing and I guess big personalities. So we were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't procreate, but. So we decided against doing that because we decided to put our friendship first. So there was discussion once about the potential of co-parenting with one of my lesbian friends, and I think a lot of gay men get to that stage where there's that discussion about, oh, should we, could we? So we sort of got to the conversation stage and decided against it, and it was a really informed decision, and I was really comfortable with it.
Family's important to you personally, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there was a time growing up that I did definitely harbour that desire, and then you learn as gay men from my generation, our generation, you learn to like kill a lot of your desires one by one until there are a few left. Which sounds really grim, doesn't it? But like, I guess that's what I did. I just never thought I'd be able to share in the dream of getting married. Never thought I'd be able to share in the convention of having children. And just one by one, I killed them all inside of me so that I wouldn't grow up really disappointed all the time. And then what's happened in the intervening years is that I've kind of rebirthed those desires one by one. So suddenly I can get married if I want to, and then when this came up, this opportunity to donate, it rebirthed a new desire in me. And what I realized was that this is absolutely right for me. I don't think I do want children right now in my life. I don't think it's cut out for them. I don't think I'd be able to give as much as myself to them as they deserve. And I talked this through at length with my mum and my late nan. And I was really close to my late nan. We were super, super close. She was one of my best friends. And it was one of the last things I told her before she died. And she said, I've always thought that you'd make such an amazing dad because you click with kids so easily, probably similar mental age or something. Anyway.
How did that make you feel, hearing that from your nan?
It was bittersweet, really, because I guess I think she's right. And I think I would be really good. I think I'd be a good role model for them in some ways, but and I think it would be good for me. I think it would bring out the best in me in some ways. Sorry, let me just adjust my chair. It has a habit of falling down. Sorry. Great with DIY and fixing chairs.
The essential skills.
No, that made me feel good in a way, but it also made me feel a little bit sad, and I just think, oh yeah, there is some grief that comes with coming out from our generation that I think I'm only towards the end of processing now. And like I say, it's sort of like coming back out of that grief and realizing that if I wanted that enough, I could have it. And then realizing I don't want it enough. So, it's been a long process, but my first offspring is due in November. And I will never forget the day that I got that email saying that there is a woman pregnant with your biological child right now. It was one of the happiest days of my life. I was just so happy for that family. And potential, there's nothing more exciting in life than possibility and potential. Like, my door's always open, and one day I might get a knock and meet someone that looks like me and is really keen to meet me, and I just think that's a lovely feeling.
Gary Nunn, thank you very much.
I'm Chris French, and this is me.
Tell me about your love of sci-fi, Chris.
So I think that began when I was younger. My gran brought me up, my mum's mum, and it was just us two. And one of her children, my uncle, he was the one that sort of got me into sci-fi, because he used to watch Star Trek: The Next Generation. So my first love, of Jean-Luc Picard. And also he watched the X-Files as well. And I just remember being sort of taken away by it, really. You just got immersed, so well into these storylines as well. There's quite a lot of diversity as well, which I think kind of connected with me. And then that continued on throughout my life. So Battlestar Galactica is one of my favorite sci-fi programs. And that's really quite... it's got so much to it. It's not just sci-fi. That there's politics in it. I'm a bit of a politics geek. There's mysticism. There's religion as well, and it just deals with them in such a direct way. And it's not the kind of robotic, aliens sort of sci-fi. I mean, there are robots. There are the Cylons. So I'm talking about things that people may not know about. But for me, it's just I loved it, and that carries through today. So a lot of my television, Netflix binging is sci-fi based. And there's definitely a reason for that. And yeah, that when I think about it, it stems from my uncle. And there was a program called Red Dwarf, which some people may know of. And that had two main characters in it who looked like me. And I grew up in sort of the 80s. So there weren't, and I was born in Northeast England, where there weren't many people who did look like me. So to see those two lead characters, and they were lead characters, in something that I enjoyed, which was sci-fi, it was just such a fantastic thing for me. And I've started rewatching Red Dwarf again recently, because they keep on adding to it. It's been going on for a long time. Craig Charles, Danny John Jules, and the others as well. But for me, those two, because they look like me and they're on TV.
A lot of sci-fi is about hope. A lot is about belonging, but it's also escape. Can you tell me, what is it? The appeal of the belonging and the escape. Those seem paradoxical, but like.
the belonging, definitely. For in sci-fi, there are so many different types of, it's not even people, right? It's characters, so many different types of species, you know. So there is that, it's all together in this universe, or different universes, many universes. So there are still challenges within, you know, but the fact that they are ultimately resolved through, you know, interdimensional interdimensional species and things. So I think there is that belonging. You're able to see a lot of difference, and a lot of difference being worked out as well. And maybe it's because that isn't something that I'd experienced when I was younger. That was the escapism part, because it was kind of, you know, oh wow, this is happening. It was really immersive. I found it immersive to just lose myself, you know, 40 minutes or whatever it was, and be, you know, kind of taken away to these far-flung places with different people, different species, interconnecting, getting on, being accepted. And that was something that really, yeah, that resonated with me, I think.
Tell me more about that being accepted, that desire to be accepted. Was that something that you were looking for when you were younger?
Yeah, I think definitely. So where I was born in County Durham, a place called Bishop Auckland, I was not accepted, really. So it was quite difficult at times. After I was born in Northeast England, and when I was about 2 years old, moved to Southwest England. And again, quite a small place where not many people look like me. So there's always this kind of feeling like I need to prove that, you know, I'm British, you know, that's born and bred, you know, literally. So it was quite difficult and confusing as well when you're young, that people say, oh, get back to your own country. I was like, I'm here, I don't know what, you know. And, you know, it takes time for that to actually get through and be kind of, oh, right, I see. So it's because of the color of my skin, right? Okay. And I've heard this before. People, I've read about it and heard it when young people will ask when they're going to get their color. And I asked my gran this, so because my mum's mum was white. So it was like the white side of my family. I didn't know that my dad's side of the family, they're from Jamaica growing up. And I had asked that question. I don't actually remember it, but my gran told me the story about saying, you know, when will I get my color? When am I going to be like everybody else? I think because not having seen people, you know, and as I said, there wasn't much representation on TV either. You know, those places where you go to. That's why the sci-fi was so, I think, you know, appealing. And moving back to the northeast of England when I was about 9, I think, going to a primary school, and just, you know, the only one is quite a heavy burden in a way. It shouldn't be a burden. I'm just me, but to have that from children, you know, from who were meant to be I had to grow up very quickly. But also having it from adults too, that was when I was kind of like, all right, I'm kind of properly on my own here, really. I remember one girl calling me a black bastard, and I just remember this feeling of rage, really, is what it was. I must have been even around 10 years old, and just running toward her and pushing her over. And she, you know, she fell and she hit the ground. And there was somebody's small village I lived in, and somebody had seen this, a person across the road, and said, what are you doing? Hey, how are you doing? We're pushing her over for. And I was like, she called me a black bastard. And the response from them was, well, you are, aren't you? And I was kind of like, right, okay. So that's from the adults as well. So I was kind of like, oh man, you know, where do I go from here? What's the thing? So yeah, that's that acceptance thing. And it's a bit difficult sometimes, because you think, well, what can I do? So I did things like, you know, I applied to join the army, because, you know, serving Queen and country, you know, how much more can I prove that I'm British, you know, by doing that? I didn't get all the way through, and I think because subconsciously I knew the reasons why I was trying to do this, and I think that still happens to me now. So I recently became a special constable for the Metropolitan Police, you know, because there's that institution thing, you know, of again, it's sort of the Queen and country kind of thing. There, you know, there is the link to the Queen when it comes to the police. but knowing what I knew about, and this is in London, so I live in Oval, which is close to Brixton, and the history of that, and the things I experienced whilst I was in there. I think there was an element of me going in as well to see for myself what it was like in terms of the relationship between the police, the BAME community, but also the LGBTQ plus community as well. I kind of felt I had to see it for myself.
The Met has been called institutionally racist and more recently institutionally corrupt. What did you find?
I would agree with the institutionally racist moniker. I think that the corruption, I didn't witness anything that I would say is corrupt, or there are absolutely fantastic officers within the Metropolitan Police. There absolutely are, and I to an extent enjoyed what I did. There's the community side of it, but seeing how some were treated compared to others, for me, I think that yes, it is. And I went through training, as we're special constables. We're essentially volunteer police officers, so we have the same. I'm no longer a special. I speak in the past tense, really. But as a special constable, you have the same powers of arrest as an officer. You have a warrant card. You essentially just don't get paid.
A hobby.
A hobby bobby. Yes, I had heard that before. Yeah. So you are, you have this power, right? Which is, you wield it. It's quite. Yeah, to have that, it's quite something. And then people who do this full time have that as well. And going through the training process to become a special constable, you're not taught to be racist, right? That's not what happened. We had a shortened version of it because we were special constables, we were volunteers. Obviously, regular officers will have training as well, and they're not taught. In my experience going through the training was very much, you need to be belts and braces about the reasons why you are stopping and searching somebody. You can't just because of somebody, the way that they look, or you have to have grounds, essentially, is what you say. And there's this is it a mnemonic you call them, and go wisely. So you had to do your grounds, observing, show your warrant card, blah blah blah. So they have this thing drilled into you. So my point is that people aren't being taught to be discriminatory within the training. So for me, it seems to be what's happening once an officer gets in, because they are being shown things by, let's say, the old guard, people who've been in for maybe 30 years or whatever, and that's perhaps where it keeps on cycling around, because I don't think people go in being racist. I think there's
institutional homophobia.
I didn't witness that, and I'm not saying that there isn't, but for me, I was in a hugely diverse intake, actually, of specials, and it was very surprising to me. It was by chance, I think. I served with a trans man officer, with other gay officers, with lesbian officers, bisexual as well, and also regulars too. And so when I went in, that was one of the areas I wanted to become more linked to, the LGBTQ side of things. So where I live in Lambeth in London has the highest resident population of LGBTQ plus people in the UK. So for me, there was always there's a need to have that community protected and a better link, a better relationship between the community and the police. Because with having the highest population, we also have the second highest incidences of hate crime in London. That's only Westminster is actually second to that, and I think because Westminster has within it Soho, so that's why they are higher. And that's not just homophobia, transphobia. There's people with disabilities also in that category, and religious hate crime also. So it's across the board. But with me, it's specifically LGBTQ plus that I'm from that community myself. So it's something that I'm more interested in terms of how people can be more confident that the police are going to do something. If somebody shouts at them through the car window, whatever they might shout at them because they're holding their partner's hand and they're a same-sex couple, or people perceive them to be from our community, then a lot of people you speak to will say, well, there's no point me going to the police. There's, nothing's going to happen. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to be able to do anything. And for me, that's a real shame. Also, people have not been helped either previously. So there's that, well, I went to them last time and nothing did happen. And, we talk like that within our group and think, well, there's no point then. And then I think people who are doing that become emboldened, and you don't know where that they're then going to get the confidence to sort of up their game, if you will, in terms of how they're going to react and what they're going to do next.
The police and the army are also very masculine professions. Was that a consideration, do you think, that you picked two very hyper masculine kind of organizations, institutions?
I haven't really thought of it like that before. I don't think so. I think it was more about what do I see as the most kind of the most like country specific thing that I could do. And for me, it's, because you hear about, there's that kind, you're fighting for Queen and country, as I was saying before. And I think it was that country thing. And with the police, I think that there was the kind of element of, let's see what's actually going on in here, because I kind of need to see it for myself. But there's also that, you're doing something for your community, you're putting yourself on the line, I suppose. And there was that sort of, well, if I'm willing to do this for the country, then, you can't sort of say that I'm, that I should go back home when I'm already here for a start, that kind of thing. But no, so I hadn't actually thought about the masculinity thing before. Because I didn't have the sort of male role models growing up, and then I don't necessarily think that is necessary, so I think I'm all right in terms of, not having had a continuous kind of male role model. But no, I hadn't thought of that before, Gareth. I'm going to be thinking about that now.
Well, you can join Starfleet, so I suppose the police
Yeah.
is the next best thing. One final question. Mulder or Scully? Which are you?
I'm 100% Mulder, I think. Yeah, I think I've just started watching X-Files again, actually. So I tend to loop through things that I watched before and I enjoy, not because I know what's going to happen, because, you do pick up other things. But, at the very beginning of X-Files, Scully is such a skeptic, right? She's just trying to like smash him out of the water when it comes to anything that could be, they call him Spooky Mulder, right? But for me, it's just I think actually my uncle and I did have this conversation, and I remember him saying to me, like, the universe is huge. There's so much of it we don't know. There's so much of it that's undiscovered. And, in terms of thinking about, there is other life out there. I mean, who knows? That could be an amoeba. It could be a tiny, but I feel there has to be, in terms of the vastness of space that there is, and, how much is left to see and explore, and that we never will get to see and explore. I think certainly a Mulder. Yeah.
Because it'd be nice to know that we're not alone, I suppose.
Yeah, there is that, isn't there? That kind of, yeah. And that you'd hope that there would be that connection as well. And, you could be able to, well, again, be accepted, I suppose.
Chris French, thank you very much.
Thanks, Gareth.
Hi, I'm Kiaz Trepte, and this is me.
Have you always been creative, Kiaz?
Oh, yes, definitely. I think I came out the womb sewing. I got taught to sew by my great-grandmother when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was always making things and pressing flowers and collecting scrapbooks even before that. And then when I learned to sew, I was just amazed by the alchemy of it, that you can actually create things from flat fabric in 2D into 3D, and the whole idea of being able to sort of build clothing just sort of took off from there. So yeah, my whole life I've always just been sort of piecing things together.
And you mentioned the alchemy there. How did the creative process make you feel?
It is like magic. I mean, I just think it's amazing. I've worked in all sorts of different mediums, but I always go back to fabrics. There's something about woven fabrics, and the fact that silk is a natural fabric that comes from silkworms, and there's wools and sheep, and it's a very natural thing. And the fact it's so malleable and different textures and colors, it's just endless. It's like a massive, great big rainbow. I love it.
Speaking of rainbows, To what extent do you think your creativity is linked with your sexuality, or are they separate?
I mean, it's always been there with me. I was brought up very feral, and we didn't really have a lot of sort of parental control. My mum suffered from a lot of sort of mental health issues, so it was a lot of me and my sister having to be sort of brought up to be the mums of the family. So as the girls, we had to sort of do all of the sewing and mending, cleaning, cooking for six. And all through that process, there's lots of creativity of having to sort of blend things and make do and just get by. So I mean, part of that with your sexuality coming out was very much about being strong and being able to cope and just being very resilient.
Mm-hmm. And were there any times that you thought, I can't do this?
Lots of times. There was lots of times. I went through lots of different phases of sort of going, when I was working out what I wanted to be, I sort of didn't even know that when people were sort of whispering, you know, lesbian, that's actually what I was. So it took me a while to realize when people were sort of taking the mickey out of me that I was thinking, oh, I was actually saying the same thing to other people. I didn't realize that was actually what I was. I just fancied girls. That was fine. Obviously, I can say lesbian now really loud and proud, and it's great that we've got this far. But at the time, it was still very sort of whispered and secret and quite strange. So through the process of clothing, I went through lots of different things of going, should I dress like a boy? Should I dress like a girl? Should I dress like a drag queen? So I've ended up with this sort of weird hodgepodge of all the things all together. And they've always been sort of worked alongside each other. A lot of people say that I am quite sort of draggy in my fashion.
You look amazing. Well,
Thank you.
Look amazing. Do you agree with RuPaul that we're all born naked and everything else is drag?
Yes, I definitely do. I think we are born completely, you know, like these little sort of pearl white baby things, and then everything else is just accoutrements and adding extra bits. And the more colour you can get on there, to me, the better. So I am quite sort of full on. I mean, I started all the sort of tattooing when I was about 16, 17, and that's been carried on every couple of years. I still do it now. Right through to my sort of late 50s, I'm still going, oh God, I'm just desperate for another tattoo. So I'm always trying to colour bits in or sort of fill in the gaps or piece things together. And that's definitely something to do with the sexuality as well. That's been an interesting journey.
And you worked in fashion for a long time.
Yes, I wanted to be a fashion designer from the age of about 8, as soon as I could realise that you could make clothes. So that's all I wanted to do. So I was very lucky to have this direction that sort of helped me get out of the poverty I was in, and it helped me have a direction to get me through to art college, which I self-funded. I left home at 16 because my dad wasn't very impressed with the girlfriends coming home. So obviously being growing up in that, again, in that atmosphere was very linked into what I was doing. And this was a way of like actually literally clothing myself and putting armor on and being able to survive. So I just worked my way up through college foundation course, then started in a small design room, worked my way up through high street stores, did a lot of textile printing, right through to couture, and ended up working in couture in Bond Street and Vivienne Westwood's shop. So it was a really long process. It didn't just happen overnight. It was a very, very long, over 25 years. But it was interesting to watch all of the different steps of that.
A lot of gay men work in fashion. Would that make it supportive for gay women, or?
I was super unusual. It was seen as very strange that I wanted to be making ball gowns for some reason. I think they all thought I wanted to just make pinstripe suits and waistcoats. So not my scene. And there was it's run by a lot of sort of gay men who were seen as sort of very sort of flamboyant, and they've got all this style, and they can look at women and see how they want to be dressed, which I thought was like slightly confusing, that I, you know, seen that I didn't have a male gaze when I obviously did, but in a very different way. So it was a very unusual set of circumstances. There was lots of occasions where I think, you know, I suffered for being put in the back, not being allowed to be visible, being seen very much as sort of like a design room manager, because I could manage the machinist, and I was good at the technical side, and I could do the sewing crafty bit, but I wasn't being given much power or sort of much autonomy to be able to actually make design decisions. So I really noticed that.
Because lesbians are organised and not stylish.
Very organised. We're very organised. We've got sensible shoes, which is ridiculous because I can walk in a 6-inch heel to this day. So I don't know what that's about. But it's really weird that there was this separation also between sort of this butchness and this femness, and the boys all got the femme bit, but apparently I was supposed to be more butch. So I was always very confused with my sexuality about how that worked as well. I was secretly going to Miss Martindale's and making cocktails and dressing in 50s petticoats.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it is that split? Did you know?
I don't know. I think it's because we had very small tribes in those days, and so within the history of support, you had to sort of like find your secret club. Or go to, even to go into a gay club. I remember having to snog my girlfriend to prove that I was gay. It was just ridiculous. Like the bouncers wouldn't let you in on the door because you looked too straight. And so it was just hilarious, this sort of mix. But there was obviously this very sort of protective bubbles. And if you didn't fit into that bubble, it was very difficult for you to move around between the groups. So a lot of the time at work, I was just seen as sort of, oh, you're going to just be the manager and you're going to deal with the sewing, crafty, fabricy bits, which I was fine with, but it would have been nice to get paid more.
Yeah, also a little frustrating, I think, surely.
Yeah, I used to end up getting a lot of the contracts, which were things for sort of like outsize or doing raincoats for Marks and Spencer's, or the quite boring things. When I really wanted to be doing, huge, great big drag dresses. Mm.
And you've left fashion behind in a way. You've left couture and Bond Street behind. You've left Bond Street behind. What is it you're doing now?
I now work, when I moved up to Edinburgh for love, met my wife in London. We've moved up to Edinburgh. She works in theatre, so was also working in a very sort of crafty, arty environment. I've done a lot of sort of freelance work in different jobs, and I've done a lot of portfolio working where I just use my creativity in whatever way comes forward. So I've done film shoots and I've done location styling. I've done all sorts of different little jobs. I ran a record shop for a while. That was fun. I have my own shop, and now I work as a puppet maker. So I just make all the things I used to make, but in really small. So they're like tiny little Chanel jackets and tiny little trousers. And I do a lot of work with the toy hospital, Leith Toy Hospital. So I do a lot of dolls' dresses and tiny outfits. So it's really sweet, actually. It's like going back to being a kid again.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that feeling, that, not childishness, but that childlike fascination with things is something that you never lose, that you should never lose, or is sort of that is creativity in a way, isn't it? Imagination.
I definitely think that. I think having a slightly mad mum as well really helps, because I was never reined in. I don't really understand sort of being sensible or being grown up. I never really have. So, and nobody's ever taught me any different. So I've just sort of gone on with it. But yeah, I love that sort of being really childish and being really creative is very definitely that feeling of being given a newspaper and being allowed to rip it up and make it into a massive Easter hat. Those examples of things I probably still go, oh, that was a great technique. I could use that even today. So it's the same creativity.
That's having an open mind, isn't it?
Yeah, you've just got to let yourself go a lot more, everybody.
So with you now, what is the advice you would give to your younger self?
I would say don't worry so much and don't try and put yourself into other people's brackets, because you'll never fit. So you just have to sort of go with what you've got and take all your inspiration from inside, not from outside. All the influences of outside are really amazing, and get as many as you can, but you're still going to end up with this thing inside you that's got to come out, whatever you do.
Mm-hmm. And looking forward, do you have anything you'd like to achieve? Are you sort of goal oriented like that? Or is it...
I have really weird goals. It's sort of like, I want to get my tattoos finished at some point, but I'm not sure what the end point of that is. I want to retire to Spain and stand by an easel in painted dungarees in this weird picture of myself in my head. But obviously I've got these strange sort of ideas. I want 15 chihuahuas. So a lot of strange goals, but a lot of them I just wait and see what happens. A lot of the things that I plan to do never work out, but I'm very good at just going with whatever turns up. So I think that's how I plan it. I don't really make set goals.
What's your favourite tattoo?
Ooh, I think I like my roses. I've got a red rose on this elbow and a white rose on this elbow. So one's for Lancashire, which is my wife, one's for Yorkshire, which is me. But also my mum represents the white rose, and the red rose is sort of like me when I was younger and my grandma. So they've got lots of connection.
Do they all have a meaning? They must all.
Yeah, every single one has a different meaning.
How many are there?
I've lost count, actually. There's not enough because there's still some gaps.
And what's next on the tattoo front?
I'm planning to have paintbrushes and scissors and something going up the neck. I think after lockdown and having most of my tattoos when I was younger, having to sort of cover them up so they never really went past my wrist, so I could still sort of cover everything up. But now I'm just a bit like, oh God, in the lockdown with everything else that's happened, just, why not?
And you're done with covering things up.
I'm done with covering them up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kiaz Trepte, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Lauren, and this is me.
Tell me about your music, Jessica.
Well, I'm a keyboard player. I'm a composer, occasionally a producer, if I can afford it. No one else asks me to. What can I tell you? And I play soul, jazz music, bluesy music, a kind of mashup of different genres, the way I like it, influenced by all sorts of things, mainly Black American music, which has always touched me most deeply. And also I love percussion and Afro-Cuban rhythms. So my band always has percussionists in it. And you're in the Mango Room, which is my little home studio that's kept me going through the lockdown, the craziness of the last year and a half. So called because you can see the little mango motifs on these acoustic panels, which is why the acoustics in here is exquisite. And what else have I got? You can see a Fender Rhodes electric piano from the 1970s, which is a pride and joy. And here is a Moog synthesizer. It's called Moog, folks, not Moog. It's pronounced Moog. So you can, that's the first thing you might learn from this little bloggy post. So there's my Moog synthesizer, and on top of it is Josephine Baker, illustrated by Paul Colan. She's always dancing and inspiring me with her wild zest and crazy eccentricity and joy. And up there I've got Alice Coltrane, but you can't see her. She influences me with her beautiful spirituality.
And what do you get out of playing music?
Oh, music is love. Music is everything. Music is my sanctuary. And this keyboard, or indeed any keyboard in front of me, this is a lovely big electric digital piano. This is my huge desk. This is my castle battlements. This is my protection. So I really admire singers, because what do they do with their hands? You know, it's like, yeah, I mean, it's all right if you got the mic and you're dancing around, but like if I was just standing behind a microphone, I would have absolutely no idea what to do. Whereas this is my zone of power. This is my castle. And when I'm sitting behind here, it's like this is my home place. This is home for me, is behind the keys. And with my band around or whatever, or in the studio recording, making sound oil paintings. So music is everything. When I was young, I had piano lessons, but they wouldn't let me do anything except classical music. And much as my mum tried to get me into what she would have considered serious music, I was totally disinterested. And as soon as I discovered whatever it was, the Beatles, or, you know, jazzy stuff, or soul music, Motown, whatever it was, I knew that was what spoke to me. So I just kind of, I had some piano lessons, but I gave it up, and then I taught myself over the years and just sort of picked up everything that I've got now with bits and bobs, and drew from everywhere and just learned to play by ear, really. Although I don't mean to do down my wonderful piano teacher when I was a kid, Miss Bengoff, who was quite wonderful. And I, you know, people give a shout to their teachers, so I should give a shout to dear Miss Bengoff, who left this realm many years ago, but she was very patient and kind with me, even though she knew I was totally disinterested in learning that which she taught me or tried to teach me, you know. So I was going to learn from Gladys Knight and the Pips or Martha Reeves and the Vandellas a lot more than I was going to learn from Miss Bengoff, bless her heart.
You talked about that being your castle and your protection. What did you need protected from?
Oh, well, protection from the whole world. You know, when, like, as I was saying, when I was young, the only time I ever felt normal, whatever that is, was when I was playing blues very badly at the keyboard. That was my sort of alpha wave space that I went into, where I just went off with my head in the clouds. And that was safe space for me, you know. So even though I had no skills or technique or theory, I was searching for the magic in it and that other place of sanctuary and just heart-filling magic. And to be honest, that's exactly what I'm still looking for. You know, my music is quite minimal, even though we might all be playing quite a lot. It's very minimal in concept, because I'm just seeing how little I need to do to find the magic and stay in it. And funnily enough, this is a bit odd reference, but I follow professional surfing. And I tried to learn surfing some time ago. Maybe I started maybe 15 years ago, and I had some wonderful lessons from surf teachers in southwest France. And they came from northeast England, from Tynemouth. So my senseis were Gabe Davis and other wonderful, my friend George. They were my surf teachers. And music is like surfing. It's waves, and you're riding them, and you try and stay on and not wipe out. No egg on face is always a good look for playing live. And if you have to wipe out, then leave them with a really great ride. So they forget the wiping out earlier. That's really important. But yeah, it's all about, it's riding waves. And I search for the magic, which I can't surf, all right. But what I do is I body surf. So I come from London originally. I was born in London. I lived in London all my life until 5 years ago. I'd been yearning to live by the sea for so long, by an ocean really, but I couldn't live by the ocean. It's too far away. It wasn't practical for me. So I decided the sea would have to do. So I moved to Margate. I looked all around the southeast coast to see if I could find somewhere that was right for me. And Margate just was perfect for me. So Thanet and Margate spoke to me, and I loved so many things about it. So I've moved to the sea, and out there is the sea about 5 minutes that away. And so I go down to the beach as often as I can, and I jump in the sea, and that goes for all year round as well. So I go in all through the winter, no wetsuit, it's gloves and socks and a swim cap. And that is something that I care about hugely. So I do some body surfing, even though I did my shoulder cuffing. I'll show you this. This is a hand plane. You stick your hand in, and then you paddle into a wave, paddle, 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 as my sensei Gabe would say, paddle, paddle, paddle. And then you stick your hand out. Can you see me now? I'm in the wave. My cozy is filling with sand. And I'm hoping not to do my shoulder cuffing. So, yeah, so for me, playing music is like that. it's riding a wave. My cozy's not filling with sand, and hopefully I find a magical line and touch people's hearts. And that's what the core of my playing to people and for people is about, is to take them away from everyday life, take them to a magical space, to entertain them and to touch their hearts.
Are you an artist who is trans, or are you a trans artist?
I'm a underachieving musician who happens to be trans. No. I'm an artist who happens to be trans, but it's a core part of me, of who I am. And that will inevitably, if I'm being true in what I'm playing, be in there. It's just not what I'm making the work about overtly. And I hugely respect and love the work of many trans artists who make work about their transness or non-binariness or queerness. And I admire them and I love their work, many of them, but that's not what I do. So being trans is integral to me, but it's inside my work, but it's not what I'm making my work about. And in fact, I transitioned 33 years ago, but I wasn't open about the fact that I was a trans woman until a few months ago. I mean, it was common knowledge in the scene that I'm in, but I was private about it. And then this year, a few things changed, and there were various, I mean, it's something that's been on my mind all my life. How could it not be? The politics of being out is something very important, but also the limitations put on queer people, trans folks, within the society, the greater society in which we live, means that they would have immediately put me in a box and limited me. And I didn't want to be limited. I didn't want to be forced to shrink into something. I mean, how feminist would that be? That you know, everyone's trying to force all women, let alone trans women, to shrink into a stereotypical box of the limited parameters of who you're allowed to be and what you're allowed to do. So I felt, for better or worse, there were upsides and downsides to my living privately and my transness. But it meant that I wasn't judged and limited by that in my music, because it's about music. It's about the joy that I take in and hopefully give through my music. And then this year, things have been coming to a head in various different ways. And there were a few elements that made me decide that now was the right time. And who knows, you know, we've all been changed by the lockdown. I haven't played a gig for a year and some months. I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy. That, you know, playing gigs with my band or other people is therapy to me. So, you know, we've all been going crazy in our different ways. If we've been privileged enough not to be really ill, or the greater issues of the pandemic in which we've been living. So it's a privilege to be depressed, you know, in this experience that we've all been through in our different ways. But now I've lost my thread, you see. Guide me, Gareth.
Can we hear some of your music?
Oh yeah, of course you can. So now this is a little piece. It's kind of influenced by disco. It's got a little rolling left-hand bass. Okay, and I thought I would honor Sylvester and all of the great disco, because why not? How could we not, you know? So anyway, this is a little piece I've written for Silver Pride, and I hope you like it. And let me see if I can do it. And if I can't, we'll do it again.